and welcome to Tallahassee Tree Talks. I'm Daniel Siegel. In this podcast, I'm going to be talking to citizens of Tallahassee about knowledge, experiences, and stories that have to do with one of our city's most incredible characteristics. Trees play major roles in our lives, and we also play a major role in the lives of trees. Join me as I get to know more about people, trees, and their relationships in Tallahassee. This podcast is sponsored by a community engagement grant from the Sunshine State Biodiversity Group in Tallahassee, Florida, a nonprofit aimed at conservation, education, and community outreach on environmental issues facing the region. For more information, visit sunshinestatebiodiversitygroup.com. In this episode, we're going to talk about tornadoes, how to pick up a 20,000-pound tree and move it, rare native Floridian trees, foraging for citrus, and USDA plant hardiness zones. We learn from Stan Rosenthal that managing a forest often requires thinking systematically. It would be impossible to plan out every detail of Tallahassee's urban forest. Today we're going to hear from someone who manages an urban forest that's a bit smaller. What would it be like to be in charge of the placement of every plant in a forest? How would you choose what to put where? Every detail of the landscaping on Florida State University's campus is incredibly intentional, including the management of trees. In this episode, get ready to hear from David MacManus, the Florida State University arborist. He makes many of the decisions dealing with trees at FSU.
I started in 2005. Previous to that, I worked at various nurseries, both wholesale as a grower and in retail in sales.
So my first question is just how did you become an arborist? How does one even get into that position?
Actually, with me, it started in my childhood, my love for trees. At my grandparents' farm, they had mimosa, Albizia gerberis, and of course it's an invasive exotic, but it has wonderful powder puff pink flowers. And I really treasured it, and I enjoyed climbing in it, and the flowers would tickle my nose, and I'd watch hummingbirds feed from it, and thought it was so magical. And then in our little home in Welborn, Florida, one day I was looking in the backyard and going through the woods and found some seedling mimosas. And I was so thrilled. And my second love affair was, of course, with the catawba tree.
David was in awe of the huge heart-shaped leaves of the catawba tree at his grandfather's house, but even more so by the way it served as food for the sphinx caterpillar, or, as it was called in Wilburn, catawba worm. He cared about these interactions between trees and other parts of forest ecosystems.
I admired trees for many, many years, and I had actually wanted to become a forester. And one of my uncle's good friends, Mark Cunningham, was a forester, and he enjoyed hunting and fishing almost any time he wanted. He was always outdoors. I thought that would be a wonderful life to live. But then when I learned that the forestry program at University of Florida required calculus and trigonometry, my dreams were kind of dashed. And so I majored in environmental horticulture, but I've had still a deep abiding love for trees. I'm a member of the International Society of Arboriculture. I'm a certified arborist. And so you could say I'm a certified tree hugger. And trees, of course, are a very important responsibility I have here at our university. And so it's a very rewarding place to be. And for a tree lover like myself, I'm able to enjoy the sight, of our urban forest, as it were, every day.
It's easy to forget how lucky we are to be surrounded by so many trees in Tallahassee. There are many places where this isn't the case.
Many years ago, when I was riding between Amarillo and Lubbock, Texas, in the line of Estacado, I was so surprised to see that there were just no trees in sight. And it looked so very barren, just those grasslands. And I thought, well, to me, this would be the worst place in the world to be. I certainly loved then when later going into East Texas, heading towards home, seeing the forest again. So I love our trees. I love our forest. Yes, I'm a certified tree hugger.
It takes a lot of people working day in, day out to maintain the plant life at Florida State. David and the almost 100 employees of the grounds department are kept very busy. So what kind of work do you engage in on sort of a day-to-day basis?
Right now, one of the main things that I do is tour the campus and look for problem areas that need, for example, weeding and pruning, check on the health of trees. And when I see something attractive, I take photos for it. I maintain our Facebook page, and that has been rewarding. I help, of course, give guidance, to our tree crew and pruning crew, and to our garden maintenance crew and planting crew, as well as the nursery. Any given day, of course, there are different responsibilities, different things to do.
And how frequently do you sort of tour the campus to check out the trees? Is that a daily task? Or?
Daily task. Even days when it rains, you have to, be aware of what's happening on the main campus. And for me, in the summertime, going out in the morning, before it gets so intensely hot, when I come in the morning, I will start my walks. I try to look at different parts of the campus each day, to get an idea of how things are looking.
So when you take a good close look at a tree, what specific signs are you looking for of potentially damage or harm?
Yes, I look first at the canopy, the color, the foliage and the density, if it's lost a number of leaves, and if there are any dead limbs or anything going wrong, with the tree. So kind of give it a health checkup, and looking at it. And sometimes you're kind of surprised when you see something that you might have missed previously, like fissures, on the trunk, or you might see something hanging that you didn't notice hanging, before. So I'm always looking up at our trees. And
it's hard to believe, but the Florida State Grounds Department does try to check up on all of the many, many trees on campus. Managing trees is an important part of maintaining such a verdant environment. David's work with trees directly impacts the other plant life at Florida State. And how do the trees on campus interact with the other plants? So there's some plants that rely on certain trees?
There are some of our plants that really do need the shade that is provided. There's one tree that we had lost, which we've now replanted, black walnut, which actually will inhibit the growth of some other trees. It will prevent them from coming up, for example, from seed. But there is a close relationship that a lot of trees have with their environment. That they need beneficial fungi, the mycorrhizae at their roots, and then a number of other plants, then are dependent, on the shade and the moisture that they provide. There are just a wide array of plants that absolutely would not survive full sun all day here in North Florida. And then the various insects and animals then that are dependent then on those plants, that need the shade. And so, but that's the way it is on not only in natural systems, but in the urban landscape as well. For example, the sweet gum tree is used as the larvae of the Luna moth. The caterpillars feed on their foliage.
David is an arborist, but in a sense, he's also an urban forester. Urban forestry allows for more control over where trees are placed and what types of trees are present, but there are other concerns that make this kind of work complicated. And so what makes an urban forest different from a non-urban or rural forest? What considerations do you have to plan for that are different or that change the way the ecosystem functions?
In urban forest, unfortunately, you're dealing with a lot of man-made surfaces, sometimes which are rather impervious, to to air and to water. This, of course, greatly impacts then the success of trees. Also in urban areas, just due to the physical cover from man-made structures and roads and walks, is we have urban heat islands. But the benefits, from the cooling effect of the shade, from the trees, then the control of water flow, improving drainage and preventing, flooding, the reduction in sound in an urban area, from natural plant cover, is significant. Actually, a property's value and even a home's value increases, if there's trees and other plantings present. But an urban forest also will vary from a natural one in that many times urban trees are not as long-lived. And they face challenges that you don't normally see in nature. Dealing with these man-made environments and softening them, as we say, are
Dealing with and softening man-made environments is part of the job of the FSU Grounds Department.
Our director likes to have, when there's a large building, to have, for example, upright growing trees not far away. And sometimes in the Deep South, we're kind of scared, of having trees that people say, well, they're too close to a building if the branches rub against the building. But yet, historically, people would purposely plant trees right next to a building, and sometimes then would even take the branches, and then bind them, to the building. And this making of espalier, some people pronounce it espalier, having trees themselves right against the building, it's not a bad thing. And having a tree canopy over a building is not really that bad because it can help reduce the need for cooling in the summer can be significant. The savings, from natural shade.
Having trees close to a building generates some risk, but Florida State University uses trees to its benefit, cooling buildings and making them more aesthetically pleasing. Part of the reason they're able to do this is their frequent tree inventories, checking on tree health to mitigate risk.
Right here, the very building we're sitting in here, you'll notice there are large live oak limbs right over the roof. And yes, it does pose some potential danger, but yet it succeeded for many years. And so, but there's always a risk and benefit to consider. And if we avoid trees, because of whatever potential risk there is, I think that is a bad mistake because the benefits, I think, far outweigh the risk involved.
The benefits to having trees around are many. David already explained how trees support other plant and animal species, but they also support people and even institutions. So you mentioned the value of a property increasing when there are trees in plant life. Do you think the trees on FSU's campus increase the value of the university?
I really do. A lot of our visitors tell us that they enjoy, seeing the trees on our campus. And I've been to some campuses that were not so tree covered. You could tell then it kind of the starkness then of buildings, and then sometimes just small shrubs nearby, large expanses of lawn area. It doesn't have the same effect or look. But I realize there's a balance to be had. Some may accuse us of hiding a number of our buildings because of the trees, but we think it's a good thing to have both trees and buildings.
Florida State would not be the same without its trees, and its trees would not be the same without David's hard work and that of others in the grounds department. So I know we've gotten, very high rankings in terms of, most beautiful campuses award. Do you find that to be, a point of pride?
Certainly. And a number of people, have remarked how they perceive our campus as being beautiful. And you're right, in a number of polls, we've been highly ranked. And that gives us also great satisfaction and joy in knowing that others appreciate the things that we treasure at FSU as well.
And how much do you think that the university sort of values and appreciates and prioritizes your department and the grounds department and the landscaping?
I believe that almost everyone at the university realizes that there is a big portion, of the reason why people find, a campus appealing in our outdoor settings. So many of our visitors, our students, they spend time outside and they can see the campus, being covered, with trees and plantings that are pleasant to the eye. That's important for them. And if we didn't have, our tree cover and our special trees, this just would not be the same location. Just would not be the Florida State University that we all know and love.
The university owes a debt to its trees, and its trees owe a debt to David.
I really like the variety in my job. I have now been diagnosed with advanced cancer, and it's kind of something that kind of shocked me, and I couldn't imagine really doing anything else than being here on this campus. But as long as I'm alive, I'm hoping to make my contribution, because I truly love my work, and like I say, I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Because Florida State's campus is a built environment, the placement of its trees is not strictly natural. Not all arrive on campus on their own. Some are grown here, but many have traveled a long way to become part of Tallahassee's urban forest. And you mentioned the FSU nursery. What is the sort of the origin of the trees on campus? How do they get here?
Yeah. Well, as far as the origin of the trees, they come from different sources. We actually have raised a number of trees from seed, but many of the trees that we get in from other nurseries, sometimes the small seedlings, and on occasion for special jobs, we get in larger trees. And our nursery is on West Orange Avenue, and we have there several greenhouses where we produce annuals and perennials, as well as shrubs and trees, and grow them on before planting them on the main campus. Unfortunately, there's a road that's going to be coming through, and it's right in the way of our greenhouses, and so they're going to be demolished. But we've been promised that we can get new greenhouses. We've already have got now 3 different greenhouse suppliers who've given us plans, and hopefully in the future we'll get started soon on making a new greenhouse.
And what is the process like for planting the trees on campus, especially when they do come, when you're not planting them from seed, when it's a larger, sort of more complete tree?
When it's a larger tree, sometimes you're going to need some pretty heavy equipment. And we have a tree crew who are experienced in the use of cranes and use heavy equipment then, of course, to dig the holes. We have an irrigation department here which will plan pipes out and either supplying drip irrigation or nozzles, to water them. And so it involves a number of people anytime we plant a larger tree. Sometimes the process doesn't go quite according to plan. Sometimes you want to dig your hole where you learn that, we can't dig here because of some underground obstacle. So you might have to shift the hole slightly. And sometimes we have to make other plans, when a site that we had planned on that seemed nice on paper doesn't really work out when you try to put it in the ground.
Some live oaks can be 40 to 60 feet tall, weighing 60 pounds per cubic foot. It's easy to imagine why a crane is necessary. Moving a tree is very difficult. Almost as difficult is deciding where to move the tree to. A lot more thought goes into choosing a planting site than you might realize.
You have to consider the environment. There's some areas where we plant trees which is actually partly shaded. So then you would need a tree that is somewhat shade tolerant. In other places, it's in full sun. A few areas, the soil might be very heavy or moist. So you have to choose trees that are appropriate. And then you also have to consider its size, its eventual, how big it'll grow. Some places, large trees are just inappropriate because of the small site. And one of the biggest restrictions for us is the root zone. If you don't have enough area, for adequate root system, then the tree will be hampered. You need to, of course, consider, the growth needs of the tree. And then also consider whether it's evergreen or deciduous, whether it has flowers or fruit that might be messy on a walkway. There are just a number of things to think about. We prefer our native trees, and when using an exotic ornamental tree, we want to use one that has a proven track record.
There are a lot of places to check the track record of a given type of tree in a given environment. Once a tree is known to grow well in a particular place, the decision to plant it there is easier. But someone has to be the one to try things out in the first place, and Florida State is a research institution.
We do a little bit of horticulture experimentation here and there where we know that there's a good chance of success. And in a few places where we can put in a so-called expendable tree, we might be a little more adventuresome. But normally when we plant, we try to think long-term, something that could be here for many, many years.
And what have been the biggest successes you've had, maybe the most surprising tree survivals?
One of the interesting things is our director, when he came in, he wanted to save a number of large live oaks that we thought were just far too big to move. And there have now been 4 large live oaks that have been transplanted from one spot to another. We got companies that came in and did the digging, the preparation of the root ball and moving them with heavy equipment. And they stand today, 3 of them at the Wellness Center, and there's 1 there at the Askew Student Life Center. The first tree, unfortunately, when it was being moved, the root ball, it broke. And then in the site where it was planted, unfortunately, the drains that were supposed to have been installed weren't, and it got waterlogged. It went through a lot of trouble. But today it's still alive. This is a pretty big surprise that they would, make the transition from one spot to another. We're talking large trees.
And which trees have maybe not made the transition? What things haven't worked out or haven't grown so well in this environment?
Sometimes we have planted things as experiments. For example, we had planted what we'd call a rainbow eucalyptus. For the fun of it, really, the trunk, this beautiful exfoliating bark that looks kind of like a rainbow. And it grew quite large and was developing beautiful, trunk. And then, of course, the cold came and killed it. Some people believe that we're now zone 9A. Of course, historically, we've been called 8B. But every now and then, we do have a genuine 8B winter, which can take out real tender plants. But we can't resist planting some things that are a little marginal.
The zones David's referring to are U.S. Department of Agriculture plant hardiness zones. Tallahassee teeters on the edge between 8B, with minimum temperatures of 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and Zone 9A, with minimums of 20 to 25 degrees. David's recent success in growing citrus trees on campus proves that Tallahassee's climate has changed since he started working here.
We have a number of citrus trees on campus, which we know they're marginal, but we've had great success with them. And so over near the Johnston Annex, you'll see there's almost like a little citrus grove there, and they're doing quite well. We've been fortunate because a number of years back in Tallahassee, we've seen lows as low as 6 degrees Fahrenheit, which could kill all citrus. So we've been lucky with some of our experiments and planting of some of the tender plants, but we try not to overdo the things that we know are tender, because then a hard winter would, of course, wipe out then a lot of the landscape.
There is a tremendous diversity of trees in North Florida, but for many, this region is at the edge of their range. And are there some trees that don't succeed so well here because of the heat of the summer too, or is it mostly the cold temperatures that are the limiting factor?
Yes, there are some plants that, some of the trees that really just resent our summer heat. And our beloved dogwoods will get summer leaf scorch, and so they need some shade here, and they need some babying. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of dogwoods due to borers, these insects that feed under the bark and girdle them and kill them. Then there are a number of other plants that are somewhat sensitive to heat as well, like Japanese maple, although we've had more luck with them. But we are in kind of a transition area here, and we're too far south for some of the northern trees. Like we'd love to have Yoshino cherries, for example, but they just won't make it here. But we can enjoy Taiwan cherries, which will take our summers better. So we're in an area of transition. We're also a little too far north, really to enjoy a lot of citrus. But like I say, recent years we've been able to grow oranges and tangelos, grapefruit, as well as satsumas, which have a longer track record here. So it's kind of exciting, being in an area where you have challenges from both ends, being too warm for some things and sometimes the winter's too cold for others.
The citruses on campus, especially the satsumas, are of particular interest to some FSU students.
There are a number of students that have a special interest. There's one small group of students that are foragers, they consider themselves, and they will ask me, well, where can I find, for example, the fig trees, the mulberry trees? Where are the different citrus trees? Because they want to eat some of the fruit, which we encourage them to do. And then we have some students who are especially interested in native species. And then I've had one group that reached out to me with the Palm Society, and they were interested in the palms on our campus. And I enjoyed giving them a tour. And then on occasion, I will get some of the alumni, who want to see how the campus is looking, now. And some of the areas are, of course, quite nostalgic for them. They enjoy coming and seeing, the changes over the years. But many times they remark on how some things are still about the same.
More often, alumni who tour FSU's campus are happy to see the things that haven't changed.
We had one lady that came all the way from South Florida just to go to the Love Oak, and actually found out that she was related to James Love. And she had her picture taken there with it. And then we've had some people come for the trees for kind of an unusual reason. Dr. Donald Rockwood, who is now retired from the School of Forestry at University of Florida, he had brought to us Eucalyptus amplifolia. And he would come, and every year his wife would take a picture of him next to some of the amplifolia that we have planted here on campus. And this is an interesting tree, this particular eucalyptus, because it is capable of coppicing, coming back from the roots after being cut down. So it can be grown for pulpwood or as a bioenergy crop, cut down, and it'll come back again from the roots. And that can be done over and over and over, instead of planting, like pine trees over a period of time, replanting crop after crop. You can plant the same trees and then cut them down, and they'll come back from the roots.
So one tree you've mentioned a couple times is the love oak, and I know this is probably the most famous tree on campus. Can you tell me the story of that oak and where it got its name?
Right. James P. Love, who directed the dairy here on campus and the farm, had a home that's near present-day Strozier Library. And then right outside his home was the famous oak, which, of course, it had some size even back when he was, here, and when Florida State University had a farm. And it started being nicknamed the Love Oak many years ago. At least I know back in the 1940s, the tree was referred to as the Love Oak. And still to this day, members of his family, are interested in it, and a lot of the alumni have memories, of studying underneath it. And it's kind of almost like a landmark for a number of people as well. Meet me over at the Love Oak. It is, of course, by far the most famous or most popular of our trees on campus.
The trees at Florida State make the campus more beautiful, but David also chooses trees with more direct benefits to students. Foraging is encouraged in FSU's urban forest, especially at the Johnston Annex by the HSF building and the Chick-fil-A, where there is a grove of citrus trees.
There's one large tangelo, there's an orange, and there are a number of satsumas. Satsuma is a mandarin orange or tangerine fruit, which is notably, cold hardy compared to other, sweet citrus. It is most dependable really for us in northern Florida. Some of our students have now learned that they are indeed truly fully ripe before the skin turns orange. And so now in the fall, we have a number of enlightened students that'll start picking them early. But I really do enjoy seeing, a student, peeling, one of the satsumas and eating it. That's good to know that they're able to enjoy something that we're planting there for them. And really the campus is for the students. We enjoy seeing them pick the figs and the citrus and cutting the zinnias that we plant. And that's why they're there.
What other trees on campus are edible or consumable?
One of the ones that's kind of odd that people probably wouldn't think about being on our campus is we have a nice size Albuquina olive tree not far from Strozier. It has small olives that you can pickle them. Of course, you have to put them in brine, to be able to use them. You don't eat fresh olives. They have to be pickled first. That's one of our more unusual edibles on campus. But the individual fruit are not all that big, but it can be pickled and it's quite tasty.
I can personally attest to the fact that the satsumas at Florida State are very tasty. They're similar to other mandarins, like tangerines and clementines, but they do have a flavor of their own. Students at Florida State make use of the trees around them in ways other than just eating their fruit. One particular thing I've noticed, especially on Mina Joe Powell Green and Landis Green, is that some of the pine trees are almost seemingly intentionally spaced perfectly for hammocking. Is that an intentional decision or just a happy coincidence?
More a happy coincidence. We were kind of alarmed when some of the trees that were a bit young, some people had put a hammock on, that we would prefer them to get some size before they tie their ropes onto them. But students enjoy, laying out in the hammocks. We want the students to enjoy the landscape here. This is a human landscape. We want people not to view our landscape, like a museum, but a place where you can actually pick the flowers and you can pick the fruit. You can enjoy the shade of the trees. You can stretch out your hammock or lay out a blanket on the ground and take a nap. We want people to be able to interact with their environment, enjoy their surroundings.
David explained the benefits that this human landscape has for people on Florida State's campus.
In especially mid and late summer or their intense heat, the shade is so very welcome. And in fact, sometimes I will plan my routes when I'm walking across campus to be underneath the trees, the shade of the tree canopies. Our trees also sometimes provide color and fragrance, a sense of place, we can have here on our campus. It's, I think, a more inviting environment, with our tree cover. And it saddens us sometimes when we lose some trees that we do treasure. Now, there are some trees that do give us trouble, like there's some water oaks and some Bradford pears that fall apart, and their limbs may hit cars or come crashing down that we have to watch out for. Student safety is also an important concern for us. We have to consider that as well. But we try to replace whatever we remove. And over time, I believe since I've been here at FSU, we've planted more than we've had to take out. But the recent, the May 10th tornadoes, it took out quite a few trees, and we won't be able to replace them all overnight, but hopefully we'll replace them with good, healthy trees that we can enjoy for years to come.
On May 10th, 2024, 2 tornadoes hit the city of Tallahassee, causing an unprecedented amount of damage, especially to the city's trees. And were there some types of trees that were more strongly impacted by those tornadoes?
Oddly enough, one of the trees that usually is the most dependable for us, the live oaks, usually that make it through a hurricane real well, in the tornado, the twisting, I guess the vortex winds, really wreaked havoc on a number of them. And we've seen damage like we've never seen before. When we have had hurricanes, we'd have sometimes pines snap in two, and sometimes we would have some of the trees stripped of leaves, and you lose a few branches. But these tornadoes, they really were pretty devastating. Oddly enough, like I say, live oaks were badly hurt.
So what's the recovery process been like to remove the debris and begin to, replace or repair some of the trees that were damaged?
We've had so many trees down that we've had to have some outside help. There are firms that have come in and given us assistance, and we really appreciate their help. And then the mountains of debris that have gone to our nursery, there's over 100,000 cubic yards of vegetative debris. That debris, what we've done at our nursery is to have these large logs chipped up to make some mulch then that we can utilize here on campus. So we have now mountains of mulch, which of course we'll be using mulch from those trees for a number of years to come. And it will, of course, take, like I say, time before we're able to replace all the ones that we've lost.
Maintaining a quality forested campus environment requires not only planting new trees, but also protecting the ones already present. Construction projects, common on college campuses, can pose a problem for trees. It's hard to balance maintaining a built environment with maintaining a natural one. A recent repair of windows at Dodd Hall, for example, threatened some trees.
Right. We were really concerned. There are Savannah hollies, which is one of the topal hollies. That's actually a natural hybrid between Ilex cassin, the Dahoon holly, and the American holly, Ilex opaca. These are special trees for us. We've always enjoyed the waxy evergreen leaves and the red fruit.
Unfortunately for these special trees, the wood and caulking of the stained glass windows on Dodd Hall required repair, and it seemed like the Savannah hollies might be in the way.
And we were informed that the company that'd be making the restoration would like the trees removed, which really shocked us. And so we decided that we would act proactively and to have them trimmed so that they would be able to take a lift or, some means, of getting behind the trees and working on scaffolds or whatever. And fortunately, we did leave enough room that we're able to use a lift. And at least now the trees are still there. And we were so worried that they were going to force us to remove them, but they've worked with us. They treasure the trees too, and hopefully, when they come back and make the restoration finished, hopefully the trees will be able to remain. We don't always get what we want entirely, but usually the university really does work to help preserve trees, and they've stood with us. The decision to save the live oaks that were moved by our director was an expensive decision, but yet it's one the university stood with us and decided that yes, it is worth it. We do treasure our trees on campus.
Trees are treasured, but the campus is also designed for people. The two can help each other out, but it's not always easy to keep both happy.
It is over time, when walkways have been made, there have been a number of features set in that sometimes were not that helpful, like seating walls. In some cases, the existing, live oaks, the root zone was greatly limited then by these seating walls, and sometimes when trees lose a good number of the root system, then you could start to see a decline on them. But normally, when we were able to give some input early on, when we mark, there's special trees that we'd like to save or work with, generally, the people who do the design work then will work with us to preserve what they can. But like I say, we don't always win.
The urban forest David works to maintain at Florida State is incredibly diverse. It does sound though that we have a very high variety of trees. How many unique species of trees would you estimate we have on campus?
Well, I really wish I had a good count. We have some very special trees that are quite rare. We have several of the Florida Torreya taxifolia, which are a federally endangered tree, which are exceedingly rare. But you can see a couple of them over in what we call the Greek Garden. It's that area off West Jefferson Street across from the sweet shop. Having them on campus, I think, is rather special. And there's some other trees that you really don't see that much in our area. One that I'm going to be featuring next week on Facebook is the myrtle oak, which is kind of like a miniature live oak. And in the wild, in sand dunes, sometimes this tree may max out in growth like 5 or 6 feet high. Although in a favorable location, it could grow to 40 feet high. We actually have some planted over at parking garage number 2, the Traditions Way garage. And this is something that is really hard to get a hold of. You can't just go to most nurseries and buy a myrtle oak. But I think it's a wonderful native that deserves a lot more planting. And of course, the Florida Torreya is endangered and quite rare and expensive. Everybody, I think, can have an opportunity, if you have a place, for a tree, to consider, one of our sterling Florida natives. And the native tree that a lot of people really love here in the Deep South, of course, is the southern magnolia. And there are a number of cultivars of it, and it has a rather long blooming season for us. We're real lucky, especially some of the varieties like Little Jim. There are a lot of really nice trees that deserve, to be planted.
With so many types of trees around to choose from, David, like most of my guests, had trouble choosing his favorite.
Oh, wow. It's kind of like asking, I have 2 children, and which is your favorite? There's so many trees that I deeply love. But as far as a tree that, I really don't think I could live without, of course, our southern magnolia is one that's wonderful fragrance, huge blooms, waxy evergreen leaves. I deeply love our southern magnolias. Of course, I couldn't do without live oaks. Their majestic, large, spreading branches and shade, and then the iconic look then of the Spanish moss draping from the limbs. These are things that I really treasure, and I couldn't live without. That's why I said, to me, one of the worst places, on the planet to be would be like out in West Texas in a spot where there aren't any trees around. That would be terrible for me, because I love, our forest. I love our trees.
And then is there one, individual specific tree on campus that you particularly value, or?
I guess just like everybody else, the love oak is one that I always, when I'm near it, I take a good look at how things are looking on it. And that is a very, very special tree for all of us here at FSU.
David's impact on the tree life in Tallahassee isn't limited to Florida State's campus.
Besides FSU, I've been involved, of course, selling of trees and growing trees in the past. Unfortunately, in the past, I've been guilty of promoting a tree that I now know was not a good choice, as the Ulmus parvifolia, the Drake elm. I don't know how many I've sold through the years, but we can see here on our campus that it is really an invasive exotic, and its little seedlings will pop up in our flower beds, and we spend hours, pulling them up. And yet I've also enjoyed, introducing people, to trees that they didn't know about, seeing them their joy and satisfaction. I planted trees for family and friends, and over the years, like I say, I've not only grown them, but I've sold them. And so there are a number of trees that I can look at and say that in some way, I'm partly responsible for it being there. And especially here on our campus, I can look at something and, say to myself, wow, I remember us planting that. And there's a great satisfaction and knowing that you're behind, the planting, of a tree and it being here.
David had an important message he wanted to send to anyone who spends time at Florida State's campus.
I'd like everybody to know that they can have some input as well. If they believe, that we are missing out on some trees that could potentially thrive here that you'd like to see, planted, we're open to suggestions. And we would like to encourage everyone to come out and stroll through the campus and see what they like and give some feedback. And if there are things, that you find unpleasant, that you'd like to see less of, let us know. This is not a perfect, park-like environment, but we try to make it one. And we want everyone to be able to enjoy their landscape experience here at FSU.
We've heard from several of the people who help manage the urban forest of Tallahassee. David's work is similar, but it's also unique in that it's just barely possible with a crew of 100 people and a lot of work to keep an eye on every tree. The trees on Florida State's campus are very purposefully chosen, placed, and managed. These purposeful decisions benefit people, but they also benefit the trees themselves and the natural environments that rely on their shade, soil retention, and water absorption. Students at Florida State have powerful appreciations for the results of the decisions made by David MacManus and the rest of the University Grounds Department. In the next episode, I'm going to talk to the creator of a viral Instagram account dedicated to the trees at Florida State. Thank you for tuning in to Tallahassee Tree Talks. Special thanks goes to the Florida State University Grounds Department and, of course, to the resident arborist, our guest, David MacManus.